Welcome to the Personal Injury Lawyer Podcast. I'm Clark Speaks. This is the anatomy of a personal injury case. Well, let me ask you a question. So my dad was an alcoholic, and that caused us a significant amount of grief and problems when I was growing up. And so I can relate to what you're saying. And I've always thought, okay, well, I may have those tendencies as well. So I have to be very careful about, the things that I do and the things that I put in my body. And so that's always been like a major sort of uh, I tend to think that the things that we think are challenges or adversity when we're growing up can sometimes be blessings. And for me, that was a blessing, right? It was a huge issue in my life growing up, but ultimately it became something that was such a blessing because it has prevented me from making those same mistakes. And so, but I always tend to think, okay, well, that's because that's something biologically or genetically in me. Are there people who don't have those kinds of tendencies that can use pain medication, and without really worrying about it too much? Or do you think that in your experience, uh, anybody who starts using this stuff the way that it's prescribed, is it in danger of becoming an addict and it permanently impacting all aspects of their life?
I'm not going to say everybody. However, if you are not careful with it before you know it, yes, can become a problem. Because see, some of it is there's a difference between dependence and addiction. Once you take the pain medicine and you continue taking it, your body is going to be dependent on it, whether you want it to or not. It's just the way the opiates work. You are going to become dependent on it. And a lot of times what happens, especially like I know now that you have to be in like pain management to get pain medication, you have to have a drug screen, and you have to have probably insurance, or it's going to be very costly to continue going to the doctor. I've done a lot of assessments on people that started out with, yes, this was being prescribed by a pain doctor. However, I went to a party one 4th of July, smoked marijuana, failed my drug screen, or had alcohol in my drug screen, and they would not give me the prescription. Well, about 3 days after taking the medication, you're going to start withdrawing. Well, probably 24 hours to 72 hours. And a lot of time that's the problem with opiates is it's like, okay, why am I throwing up? Why am I having all these stomach issues? Why do I just feel really bad? Why can't I get out of bed? So then you go looking for that medication. And a lot of my clients already know who, like I know a friend who's prescribed it. So if I took too many, I could get some from her or him, vice versa, to tide me over till I could get back in with a doctor. Pain medicine on the street is very expensive. I know at one time it was like $1 per milligram. So if you were on 20 milligram of hydrocodone, it's going to be $20 for one pill on the street. And a lot of my clients, they started going that route until it got very expensive. And then it's like, hey, here's some heroin, here's a whole bag, and it's only $15. And I'm not saying everyone who is prescribed pain medicine misuses it or will become addicted. I just know you have to be very careful. I had, it says the research that I found said 1 in 4 patients that are prescribed opiate medication become addicted to it.
So in your experience, maybe not through study, a particular study, but just in your professional experience, do you see, I mean, how many people then follow this pathway down into some other kind of illegal drug?
I mean, there's a lot. It's very rarely do I do like a drug assessment on someone who has only done one drug their whole life. Other than alcohol, there is a lot of alcoholics who alcohol is the only thing that they've ever done. But when you talk about other drugs, most of the time they are addicted to multiple things, or they like my life was out of control with opiates, so I haven't done opiates in 2 years, but there's a such thing as substitution. So we quit one drug because our life got unmanageable with that drug, and then we go to another drug. I have a lot of clients who fit that category. I mean, I fit that category. When my life got unmanageable with one substance, then I'd be like, okay, I won't do that, but I can do this over here. But it was only a matter of time for my life was unmanageable with that as well.
So is that how people might go from heroin to cocaine or meth or crack or whatever?
Yes.
Is that typically, like, I know there are exceptions to everything, but is that typically the progression that you see?
Yes, most of the time it starts with, of course, alcohol, probably at a young age, before the age of 21, and marijuana. And then, you're doing those two things, you're at a party, someone says, hey, I have some cocaine, and you're like, sure, I'll try it. And then, before you know it, your life is out of control. Or, hey, I got some meth, or here's some opiates. I think that's a lot. It starts in that, with that manner.
What do you say to people? And like I hear this sometimes. Uh, Marijuana is no worse than alcohol. Um, Marijuana should be legal. If a person does smokes marijuana, what's the big deal? And really, I grew up, and I didn't grow up around marijuana. I grew up around with alcohol and impacted me, and so and I learned a little bit about it later, and I saw that you know, I never saw anybody become abusive by smoking marijuana. I never saw anybody really just get angry and hurt somebody else that they maybe cared about because they were high on marijuana. Um, so there's a compelling argument for what's the big deal, and I don't know. I'm just genuinely curious. What do you think about that? If if a person, a friend or a colleague or somebody is, you know, I mean, obviously it's illegal, but in my state and yours, but if somebody were to go to a place where it's legal, uh, Amsterdam, Colorado, New York, or wherever, what is your thought about that?
Well, if you are a person in recovery, marijuana is a drug. If
I'm
this is
asking
a
for your
hard,
professional opinion, and I don't want to get you in any trouble with your
okay.
associations, licensing associations, or employers or anything. So if it's not comfortable for you to answer, I just wondered if you think it is a gateway drug that
Yes,
can
I think it's a gateway drug. I do. I think you have to be careful with anything that makes you feel better. I mean, that's,
artificially.
yeah. And I mean, nicotine, caffeine, food, sex, shopping, gambling. I mean, it's all of those can become an issue if you're not careful.
Okay. Well, so we've talked about how people get into these types of situations. Um, uh, and you've talked about, um, you know, uh, how people can use negative things to deal with pain, to deal with trauma, to deal with things that are emotionally impactful. Um, so, what I want to know is what are some healthy alternatives that people could do? And if is this something you help people with to find, you said substitution. So for me, when I stopped drinking, I just stopped drinking. I'm like, I'm done with this. And I basically substituted an activity in my life for that, which was, um, I just kind of became comprehensively involved in the lives of my kids and my family. I felt like that was a healthy, intentional alternative. But what do you think? What are some healthy things that people can do to replace some of these negative things that have negative consequences that can help them deal with trauma or pain or these other issues?
There is a lot. So, I mean, if you have trauma, then I would say find a therapist that you can talk to and feel comfortable with. After meeting your therapist for about 3 times, If you don't feel it's working, then you need a new therapist. So there's always the therapy aspect of it. There's getting involved in clubs, um, get involved in the gym, volunteer. There's 12-step meetings for any addiction you could ever think about. And one good thing about the pandemic is now a lot of them you can get online. Um, but it's about finding that support. They say the opposite of addiction is community and getting involved. So, when my group or at my job go hiking, find a new hobby, do art, do crafts, get involved in the senior center or there's just so many of them out there. Um, I think that's the number one, because you got to have that positive support. And if it is family, hanging out with them, what greater blessing can you give your family than spending time with them?
Well, so I had a similar conversation earlier in the week with someone who had been through a catastrophic accident with their wife, with his wife, and the two of them were talking about it, and they talked about the way that they chose to deal with some of these things. They mentioned games, movies, music, art. They weren't really artists, but they would try to be creative and do fun things. Um, Pets is one thing that they said that I thought was interesting. Of course, family. Things that I've experienced also working out. That was another thing that I put into my routine that was took away from, um, that replaced that sort of alcohol thing is working out. Um, and then, giving back to other people. That seems to be, to me, that seems to be a part of your plan in terms of recovering is to take what you have experienced that's negative and then take what you've learned through your education and through your work experience and try to help improve the lives of others. Is that a part of your personal recovery process?
Yes, it is. And not only in my career, but I still go to 12-step meetings. I sponsor women. Um, because one time, I know when I first got in recovery, it was just so shameful and so much guilt wrapped in it. I was like, I'll never tell anyone these things. But now I have found by talking with someone and sharing your experience, strength, and hope, it gives them hope to know, okay, she's staying clean, she's doing these things. I can do that in my life as well.
So how does someone, or how do you uh overcome like the shame and guilt thing? Like uh, me 10 years ago would have never on publicly said, yeah, I have an alcohol problem. Like I can't imagine saying that, or 15 years ago. Um, just that's a private thing, but if I think about it in terms of, hey, this could be helpful to someone else, then that to me makes it, uh, number one, I'm not like just sharing too much personal information, but number two, it's like, okay, well, what do I care? If it can help somebody else, then I'll share it. I mean, but how does someone overcome the idea of the shame and guilt and like embarrassment?
Well, I think one, I know for me, I went to 12-step meetings. I got a sponsor. I started working steps. And in the beginning, someone told me, you know what, you might have been that person 5 days ago, but you have 5 days clean today. So today you're doing everything in your power to be a good mom, be a good daughter, be a productive member of society. I know that helped me a lot knowing, okay, you know what, yes, I might have been addicted to this or doing those things then, but that's not me today. And of course, I mean, meeting other people, the first meeting that I went to, I think I cried the whole meeting because it was so powerful, because people were sharing things that I had thought in, like, I thought that I was damaged or broken in some way, but to hear people openly sharing about those things really give me hope that, hey, I can do this. This is possible.
Well, so it sounds like to me that the recovery community is a powerful force and something that if someone is experiencing challenges from either alcohol abuse or some other kind of drug abuse, that if they do reach out, there's a community there waiting for them to embrace them and help them through this process. Is that fair?
Yes, there is. I mean, now we have Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Opiates Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Meth Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous. There's double trouble for people who have co-occurring. And co-occurring is you have addiction issues as well as a mental health diagnosis. There's even grieving. If you're grieving, the best thing to do is to find a support group and talk to others because they've been where you are. Yes, someone can be supportive who hasn't lost a child per se, but unless you've been in those shoes and say, hey, I've been there, I didn't think I was ever going to be able to live again. However, I've learned how to deal with it and, be able to have a life.
Okay, so if that's a step that someone should take once they realize they have a problem, what are the things that a person might how would someone know I have a problem? How do you know well, I guess you tell me, how do I know, how does someone know when they have a problem?
Well, most of the time, if you have a problem, your family has said something to you. Hey, I'm worried about you. Or, they might have said you're too much when you're drinking. You can't, we love you, but we don't want you over at our house if you're under the influence of something. Sometimes it's you got a DUI and you got arrested. You've lost a job, you're in trouble with your job. Sometimes it's personal, like, why do I keep doing this to myself? Why am I so isolated? So it doesn't have to necessarily be outside consequences, because a lot of times there's those internal consequences that you kind of know, hey, I might have a problem. I mean, it's even that way with depression. If it's depression, anxiety, okay, I haven't gotten out of bed in 3 days. I haven't showered in a week. I haven't been able to feed my cats. Well, that is probably, it's a problem, but it's kind of, where do you go for help?
Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.